Julius was married, and they desperately wanted to have a child, and they were unable to have a child. And there was a home for Jewish children whose families couldn't take care of them. And so Esther and Julius took in a young boy by the name of Fred Bernard as their son. Within 2 years, Esther conceived and gave birth to Arnold Kharasch. So now Julius has these 2 really little boys. And Esther died when she was very, very, very young. I think all the uncles decided this was a time that my grandmother should now stop working, take Julius's children, the boys, take in Fred and Arnold, and raise them with my dad and Norman and Sarah. So now there were 5 children in the house. My father was delighted to have these additional brothers. And the bond was exceedingly close.
Julius later remarried and had a son named Aaron, who says, "I remember my father sitting in a chair, always reading the classics. He was a man who spoke 5 languages and loved to talk history. That was his real calling."
My Uncle Nathan and Uncle David were both pharmacists, and they had a drugstore in Lawndale across from Franklin Park. It was a long, narrow store, as I remember, with the pharmacy area deep in the back and lots of huge bottles in the basement. Certainly wasn't at today's Walgreens. They were a wonderful team together. They were good pals. They were very, very funny. The stories are amazing.
The drugstore closed and they established Kharash Imports.
But the 2 brothers, again, had this symbiotic relationship where they weren't pharmacists, now they were entrepreneurs together. Kharash Imports was located in a building on South Wabash. Aunt Faye was the chairman, president, and dictator in a very nice way. She was always
chief salesperson.
Oh, and chief salesperson of Kharash Imports. Uncle Nathan and Uncle David were in charge of the shipping department. It was hilarious. They were like something out of the Sunshine Boys. Russell Stover was their biggest client, and they did a lot of work with them. And I think Uncle Nate and Aunt Faye actually went to Japan and created baskets that was going to be, I forget what year, but it was going to be their Easter supply nationwide. And that was a huge item for Aunt Faye and Uncle Nathan. Well, the baskets were drop shipped from Japan to Russell Stover in Kansas City with instructions to open the boxes so that the baskets could air. But Russell Stover didn't see that one very important prohibition, directive to open the boxes. Well, prior to Easter, they opened the boxes and the baskets are inundated with this horrible smell, and they can't use them. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of baskets. It ended the relationship with Kharash Imports and Russell Stover. After the family got established and the brothers were educated and Nate and David had their drugstore and Uncle Isidore had moved up the chain at Hart, Schaffner and Marx and was always such a dapper gentleman, and Morris was situated at the University of Chicago as a professor. The family had to get together. This was after their parents were gone. They had a poker game. The poker game was usually once a month and it rotated homes. My father had to prove himself as the first non-brother to enter the family that he could play in the poker game. I think they loved having him because he was a lousy card player. He was terrible. This was family, but what you lost, you lost. My father could afford to lose very little, but he, of course, lost it very quickly because he was not a good player. But what the brothers didn't want to do was to make him feel that he was, a second-class citizen in the game. So he was allowed to make sandwiches and sell them back to his brother-in-laws. so that he would have enough money to go on in the game and lose it back again.
Inventions Incorporated was the brain trust of the four uncles, Isidore, Morris, Nathan, and David. And they hired a chemist by the name of Dr. Jacobson to run it. And the purpose of Inventions Incorporated was for Dr. Jacobson to discover a wonderful product that they could then sell and make money on. And so one night, my father came home with the latest invention. It was to curl hair. And because my father had two daughters, myself and my sister, they decided they should take it home to Eleanor and have her do the girls' hair that night and see how it was. And my mother did. Both my sister and I patiently sat while she curled our hair and put all the stuff on, and it smelled terrible. But we did it, and we ended up having some curl in our hair. And the next day my father said, "Okay, Eleanor, what should I tell them?" She said, "Well, Isidore, I know they have curl, but it smelled terrible, just terrible." So he went back to the meeting at the drugstore and said, "Smells bad." They said, "Okay, let's sell it. Let's get rid of it." They did. And it became the Tony Home Permanent. And it always smelled.
There was a strength there that other families didn't have, but they had it, and they always had a good sense of self. I don't know where it came from. It probably came from just having each other. This was a family. They had come a great distance. They had come through fears and worries and, uprooting, but they were together. And that was the main thread that ran through the whole family for generations.
It is exactly 100 years since Libby and Selig Kharasch first stepped onto American soil. Today, descendants of the original family total 101 people. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, scientists, architects, business owners, and babies who live all over America. They each have their own individual personal stories. But for all of them, this is how their story began.